Hey gang, it is Wednesday again. That means it's hump day, and that means it's time for Dentists in the Know. Welcome to Dink's Hump Day Happy Hour. This is your backstage pass for current trends, politics, and education in the dental world. It is live, and it is over a cocktail. Why? Because we see patients. That's why. Anyway, you know the routine. I'm here with my besties, Dr. Chad Duplantis and Dr. Jennifer Bell. And as you know, we are all practicing dentists. We are all business owners and we're all educators. Our job is to bring all of you in the know. We have another great show in store for you. So one of our great Dinks friends, one of our great contributors, and just a great guy. I just have the word great in my mind when I think of Ryan. Mm-hmm. Dr. Ryan Walsh is with us. He's an endodontist extraordinaire. You've seen him before. He's talked with us before on the show. But we're going to have another chat with him tonight. And I think you'll be hearing even a little bit more from Ryan as we go throughout the year. But before we bring Ryan on, JB, you have any news for us?
Always. Isn't that my job here? That's why you guys pay me all those big bucks, right?
I've got to ask rhetorically.
So first off, want to make sure everyone's aware the first week of March is Dental Assistant Appreciation Week. I'm going to get the guys back on here in a bit because I'm genuinely curious what other offices do for the staff appreciation weeks. We've got Dental Assisting Appreciation Week. Then we have Dental Hygiene Appreciation Week. Then we have an Administrative Assistant Day, which we subsequently turn into a week in our office as well, just so that everything is fair. But I'm really curious to hear what the guys do for that. But we'll continue to remind you so you don't get caught checking social media the week of and going, oh, crap, I totally forgot to do anything. Just here for you. You know what I'm saying? Because that's happened to me. So anyway. Also important to note that the U.S. Court of Appeals of the 9th District, I feel like they're forever in the news, did overturn a ruling, and now dental health aid therapists or mid-level providers are able to receive Medicaid payment for services. So that was a ruling that had been struck down, that they couldn't actually be paid from the federal government, but that has been overturned. So we'll see if that continues to move through the Court of Appeal system, or if that will be a final ruling. Here's an interesting pop culture story. So there's a lady from the Northwest, Pacific Northwest, who traveled to Costa Rica, where they advertise dental services that are 30 to 50% less than what you can pay in the US. She went to Costa Rica seeking dental care, and unfortunately suffered some type of cardiac event during the anesthesia and has ended up in the hospital on life support or ventilators. Different stories as I was trying to dig through it a little bit more about what the extent of her injuries are. And it doesn't quite identify what the issue was. Was it the anesthetic itself? Did she have malignant hypothermia, for instance? Or was it an actual dosing issue or just negligent care? Or was this going to happen regardless of whether she was in Costa Rica or in the US? Of course, it doesn't look good for medical tourism when these things happen overseas, but she's also stuck there because the family cannot afford to fly her home. So this has now kind of become a call to action for her local community to see if they can find a way to help fund her return back to the US for medical care. Medical tourism, I think, is always sort of an interesting conversation. In Ocala, Florida, there was a drunk driver who unfortunately found his car inside of a dental office called Healthy Smiles one morning around 12:30 a.m. The police received a call that the building had received significant damage. And I'm just trying to put myself in that situation to think, oh man, you come in the next day, or maybe you get the call during the night, just to find out that the front half of your building has now been entered by a car. How do you put the pieces back together? How do you open up and continue on? And so always an interesting problem-solving venture, I think, when these things unexpectedly happen to small businesses. But unfortunately, that happened to a dental office in Florida. Last week, we mentioned a couple really hot topics, so I encourage you to continue to keep the pulse on this FTC discussion on non-competes. It certainly would have significant impact on employment contracts. So if you're hiring an associate or if you are an associate, I think this could be a real hot topic and could potentially render these contracts null and void. If you're selling a practice or looking to buy a practice, it looks like acquisition non-competes will probably not get included in that particular discussion, but you never know. So we'll see how that continues to unfold as well. And as mentioned many, many months ago, the CDT overhaul project is still in active mode. While the open comment period is closed, they are still seeking input from organizations and individuals about their perception and plans, their perception of the overall overhaul program. And, is this going to be good for dentistry? Is it not going to be good for individual providers, et cetera? So I will continue to keep watch of that. No action has been brought to our attention at this point, but certainly it's still in an inquisition phase. It has not moved to a formal movement yet. And with that, that's the news.
Moving forward, Dr. Ryan Walsh. Sometimes you invite a friend to hang out with other friends and you never really know how it's going to work, Well, the first time I brought Ryan out with Jeff and I was in Chicago last year, and it was like they kind of hit it off, and then I was, just kind of kicked to the curb, So, and then when I brought him around JB, it was kind of the same story. But regardless, it was one of those things that I said, hey, I think Ryan can really benefit our group. And everybody really agreed that was the case. He's a pretty good endodontist. He's a horrible golfer. He's a good dad. He's a good husband. He's a great friend. All kidding aside, probably one of the best endodontists I know. Here's Dr. Ryan Walsh.
Hey, gang.
I'll give you the golf clap.
I appreciate that. Good to see you guys. Thanks for having me back on.
Good to see you.
You look so relaxed.
I need a bookcase. It's determined.
Yeah, you need a bookcase.
It's a Texas thing.
Yeah.
It is a Texas thing.
Yeah.
Dang it.
JB, you need anything but a white piece of paper.
when
That's like the drywall that
literally
hasn't
anything.
Yeah.
When Ryan was down below, his screen's kind of fuzzed out until we bring him back up here. And I was looking over his left shoulder and I was like, what is that behind Ryan? And I was like, is that a bong? I was like, damn, man. And then I realized it's a microscope. Now that's one thing that I don't have in my study is a microscope.
I don't really see anything very intelligent on his, though. I see like lots of things that are old and seem somewhat scientific. Meanwhile, let's just go pick one random book, Chad. One random book. Go pick it. Close your eyes and do it.
Is that like The Very Hungry Caterpillar?
Yeah.
Damn. It was the World Atlas, the Imperial Edition.
A Desperate Man's Guide to Gambling.
Oh, goodness.
And I can honestly say I've never read it, but I did knock over all of the other books on the shelf trying to buy one, trying to pick one random book.
He doesn't even know what's on the shelf. They're for show.
No.
Different show. Yeah.
So I divide mine between the ones I've read and the ones I haven't read, and you can see which stack's substantially bigger than the other.
Yes.
I could pretty much guarantee you I haven't read anything back here except for one. Well, maybe two. My wife decorated those shelves. So,
You did a
They're
nice
old
job.
They're old books. Yeah, they're old books. So
Good job, Ellen.
Yeah. Thanks.
So
Ryan,
where does DONK come from? Because I don't know. I mean, I don't know this. I've known Ryan for a while now. I've heard you call him that. I've heard him call him that, but I don't know where it came from.
I've never called him Donk, unless
you
I've
guys
been
are
singing
dinks.
Donkashane to him.
Oh, he's the donk of our game.
Okay.
I'm the dentist out of the know.
No, I love it. I love it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So,
by the end of the show, you become a dink. That's how it works.
Maybe someday when I grow up, I hope to be a dink.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So Ryan, we
it's all in capital letters, so it's a big dunk.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. We had a lot of things that we wanted to talk about tonight, which we won't get to if we keep this up. But one of the things that I thought you could share, we were talking about pitfalls of the general dentist, but why don't you, if you recall them, the 3 Ps, why don't you mention kind of the 3 referrals that we talked about and maybe kind of what happens throughout those referrals?
Sure. This was actually a fun talk. Chad and I were asked to give a talk kind of about the endo GP relationship. And I think Chad broke it down really well. And then so we kind of created these profiles of general dentists that refer. And, one, as Chad likes to refer to himself as El Presidente, to quote, that's as an endodontist, that's your bread and butter. Those are the folks who refer a lot of cases. But it's not just referring a lot of cases. It's so much more than that. It's those patients are always educated. They know why they're coming. They understand the benefits of sometimes you have to see a specialist. And so kind of creating and cultivating that relationship from my perspective as an endodontist is priceless. It just tends over the course of a career as well. And see, I've been doing this about 10 years now here in Keller, and like minds follow like minds. And I'm sure you guys see it both with your colleagues and as you progress, but also with your referrals. And the El Presidentes, again, they just tend to practice very similarly. We have like minds. I think it's about patient care and not putting white lines on the paper or on the radiograph. And so El Presidentes, from my perspective, really make my practice. But there's also 2 other levels. And, one is the perpetual. And this one's kind of a fun person because, it's that person that you may not really talk to but twice a year. You probably see about 6 cases, a year from this person. But each time I like to say they have strings attached. That person usually calls and asks to talk to you at the exact same time they send the referral. So the referral hits my front desk and they're like, oh, hey, by the way, Dr. X is calling to talk to you. I'm like, okay, this is going to be an issue because there's always strings attached. Hey, I think I might have broken a file, which is code word for I crammed something in there and it's going to be impossible to get out. Or what's another good one? I prepped the tooth and then I told him everything was going to be okay. And then all of a sudden it blew up on him. I was like, I don't have any idea what happened. I'm like, well, okay. But as an endodontist, it's one of those things. That's kind of why you're there. So I don't really care if you refer 6 cases or 600 cases a year. It's my job to help the patient. And so, those are always the fun and interesting cases. And I'm sure you guys see patients from Dr. Perpetual over time. They probably migrate around and whatnot, but those are always interesting conversations to have because, you don't want to throw the doc under the bus. You don't want to throw the patient under the bus either. Those end up being fun and interesting cases. And those are the ones that often get Instagram or Facebook posted because they are such a bear. But if you can get one and make it sing, as they say, those are kind of fun cases to deal with. And Chad, you're going to have to help me out with the other one. I got the bookends covered, but I don't remember.
The third one was the potential.
The potential. Yes, that's right. And that is JB. When we were doing this, when Chad and I were kind of creating this lecture, JB cold called my office and talked to my front desk. And I didn't tell them anybody was calling. I didn't tell them anything. And she acted like she was a new dentist in the area, just kind of wanted to touch base and reach out and get to know us and things like that. And so for me as an endodontist, that's a potential referral because, hey, it's a new doc in the area. I do want to be a resource. Again, it's so much more than just being the person who does your root canals and sends them back. It's about crafting relationships and building the knowledge base because general dentists do 80% of the country's root canals. I mean, that's a cold, hard fact. And so I'm just doing the tough 20, so I spend my whole life in the back of the mouth, and life is good, but I also want to educate my GPs on how you can efficiently do root canals, how to make them a moneymaker for your practice, because you're doing the patient a service, you're doing yourself a service, and you're doing your practice a service. And you're indirectly, you're doing my office a service. And that sounds really silly because you're doing the root canal, but you're getting some of the low-hanging fruit out of the way, so that the patients who really need it, or the really tough cases, or the patient who's just has a screaming toothache, that I can get them in that day. If I were bombarded all day with anteriors and premolar teeth, which that would be a sweet, sweet life. But the fact of the matter is, there's just
don't pretend like you wouldn't like it.
He gets anteriors and premolars from me.
Yeah.
But hey,
I thought about becoming an endodontist many times.
There you go.
I'm an occlusodontist.
I'm an occlusal composodontist.
Yeah.
So with that being said, I think there's a valuable lesson for all of our listeners and all of our teams, is that the potential is a great way to build your team. And I will say that your team passed the test with flying colors, but what was hilarious is for the next 3 months, I would have to say, hey, it's Dr. Duplantis. I won't tell everybody what I call you when I call over there, but I'm like,
oh, you can, it's all good.
Actually, I usually say, hey, it's Duplantis, is dipshit available? And you're like, let me go see Dr. Walsh. But no, it changed from, hey, it's Duplantis. I just want to let you know that this is not on a recorded line. Oh, thank God. Okay. And he does have a great staff, but I think that everybody should have a secret shopper, once every 3 to 6 months, and just call in and see how your team is handling those calls. Because although we're not an office as GPs, that's, a heavily referral based office, we do have the general public, which is sometimes, a little bit different than another doctor's office calling.
Well, you would be amazed how many times I call back to talk to a GP, and I get the front office, and I just think to myself, I wouldn't schedule if I were a patient. It's like, we say this to our front office all the time, and I think it makes a lot of difference. It's smile through the phone. Smile when you talk, because I can hear you smile 100% of the time. And that just seems so inviting and friendly. I just want to engage with that person, as opposed to the person who's just, monotone. They're not living their best, or they're not living their best self right now. So it's, you know what I mean?
Jeff, do you think it's weird that at this point, Chad does not have his cell phone number and he could just reach out to him directly?
Well, there's probably a reason for that, JB, and it's probably
with my endodontist, and I'm El Presidente, and with my endodontist, I send him a text, and we, we converse in very personable kind of ways. I don't, have to go through a gatekeeper or.
Well, he usually texts and calls, and if I don't answer, he feels like I'm his girlfriend who's avoiding him. And so,
I see.
He feels guilty.
So he's El Presidente high maintenance.
Yeah.
He's a bougie El Presidente.
Bougie.
Understood.
Yeah.
So I love it.
Say no more.
He then calls the office, and now it's to a point where I had to talk to my front office and tell her I was disappointed in her, because he asked, hey, where's dipshit? And she's like, let me go see if Walsh is around. I'm like, whoa, there's 3 of us here.
Yeah. They're all dipshits, frankly.
Yeah.
So it could be any of us.
Yeah.
Hey, Ryan, I got a question.
Fire away, Jeff, bro.
Chad mentioned, and as you talked about, that there's a lot of GPs that are doing most of the endo. You said 80% of the endo. So this is my curiosity, because I actually started giving it up a while back. I was doing a ton of it. And it just got to the point where, once I start to do a lot of something and don't do as much of something else, the second I stop doing as much of something else, there's someone else that can do it better than me. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to get it out of the office. But as someone who gets to see all of these different kinds of cases that come from, the GPs that do it a lot, the GPs that don't, what are some of the most common pitfalls that you see, or some of the most common problems that GPs run across with, an endodontic case that they might think is a slam dunk, or, what are some of the most common problems that you see, or some ways that GPs could possibly improve themselves if they want to do more of this?
Sure. I was thinking about that. And I really think it comes down to diagnosis. I think being as an endodontist, one of the things that we do really well is we're good diagnosticians. And I think if you let the patient go and kind of ask them a few questions, they're going to tell you what's wrong if you just listen. Many times, not always, but it also helps from my perspective that you guys kind of help narrow it down. I mean, to a quadrant, to a half of a mouth, that really helps. But we all know referred pain, and that can go, opposing teeth, that can occasionally go cross arch, that can go a bunch of different places. And so being an acute diagnostician, I think is really important. So things that I see that I don't want to say they're missed. That's not the right way. That's not the right way to put it. But things that GPs are all over, but just don't make that final diagnosis are cracked teeth. Things like the patient comes in and it's like, I have this tooth, or I have this toothache every once in a while. It doesn't happen all the time, but when I get it just right, those seem to be the key words. When I bite it just right, I get this sensation. And as soon as I hear that or see that on a referral, for me, cracked tooth just went right to the top. Not root fracture, but a cracked tooth. And the reason why I think that they're challenging cases, they're kind of pitfalls, but they're also, if GPs can hone their skills or maybe think the same way or think the same thought process I'm thinking, well, they can save their patient an endo referral, because many times, about 80% of the times, our studies show that if you could just get a full coverage restoration on that fractured tooth, that is definitive treatment. Now if they're starting to have lingering cold sensations, or every time they touch the tooth it hurts, well, I get that. Well, then let's consider root canal treatment. But a lot of times GPs can diagnose themselves right into a crown by just getting out your old tooth sleuth and having them bite around on the cusps. I mean, that's what I do.
Love the tooth sleuth.
I do too, but
you got to hit every cusp, because if there's an MB cusp fracture and you don't hit MB cusp,
favorite cheap instrument in the toolbox.
I'm going to tell you, a few years ago switched. I only use a cotton tip applicator, and I put it in the patient's hand, and I say, just bite on that side and see if you can find that spot. Because I'll do the tooth sleuth and I can't replicate any kind of symptom. But a lot of times their cognitive, ability to remember the pain will start to move that cotton tip exactly where that just right spot is. And it can be in a fossa, or it can be in some very weird, like sometimes it's not a cracked tooth. Sometimes it's a failing restoration, where we're debonding somewhere and they start moving it around. And anyway, so I've gone even cheaper, Jeff. I've gone to the old applicator, and I will say it's actually been.
Well, you do have a PPO practice.
I am in network, so we basically had to eliminate all of our instruments.
That's exactly what I do too. I start with the tooth sleuth, and if I can't dial it in, I give them I'm like, bite on this delicious tasting wood, but find it, because they're going to put it like these weird angles that I would never put it. And then it's sometimes if I can't get it, then I say bite, and I just want you to grind your teeth ever so slightly, like you're going to chew a piece of steak. And most of the time we can hit it. And I think you guys would be surprised that there's a lot of times I see those cases and I say, just go back to your dentist and let's crown it. If it's symptomatic while you're in a temporary, come on back. There's not a fee to reevaluate this tooth. Let's take a look. And, it's kind of, I'm happy to diagnose it for them. That's why I'm there is to help with diagnosis. But some of those don't ever need to leave the office, just full coverage restoration and go from there.
I love the little tips that we throw out there that make each of us think a little bit. But you say cotton tip applicator. One of the things that I love to use is a low speed saliva ejector. That's
Mhm.
that's not been used, of course. The reason being is because it's closer to the consistency of the tooth sleuth, but it just allows a little bit more flexibility when you're walking around with it. And I've found
Yeah.
that that's been pretty beneficial in isolating the spot. But I don't know about you all. I haven't seen a cracked tooth that just requires a crown basically since COVID. If they crack them, they crack them.
Boy.
And I mean, I can't tell you, how many have been. I've sent cases to Ryan that, of course, I can't see without a scope, and it doesn't necessarily show
Yeah.
up on the cone beam, but extraction,
Mhm.
and then, fortunately, in working with, like Ryan said, learning the mindset, the more you work with a specialist, any specialist, you start learning their mindset, and it's helped me become a better diagnostician and know when to refer and just, okay, I know what they're going to say. If you want to go, if it would make you feel better, but this tooth's going to be extracted. And, now we're kind of, speaking the same language.
Yep.
Chad, I think you just made a great point that I think when a lot of general dentists, they say, well, I'm going to keep everything to myself. It's a tough economy. I'm going to try and do as much as I can. I think they're missing exactly that opportunity, because that really good relationship, and Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you develop that kind of a relationship with a referring doctor, there's almost this mentorship thing that kind of goes back and forth where, they're sharing some of their knowledge with you, and you're sharing some of your restorative stuff with them, and it's really like this growing and learning experience. And I think that people who don't, utilize referrals and find people that are, maybe better than them at some of these procedures, really miss out on a key opportunity to learn and better themselves as clinicians.
I completely agree. I feel like sometimes we get too compartmentalized in our own minds, or it's easy to fall into the rut of just doing your practice as opposed to, we're here to learn from each other at the end of the day. But I mean, there are so many things that I've learned from Chad, restorative, occlusion, things like that. And again, just little tips like that. Like he likes to
Gambling
use
for
this
desperate people. He read that book.
Yep.
he tells me to double down on, on, tells me to double down on pocket 8. So I'm like, but no, I think the camaraderie that grows, because a long time ago when I was first into practice, Chad was a potential. We didn't work together that much. We didn't know each other. And so over time, we've cultivated this relationship where I try to think like him as far as some of the restorative things of, what material is he looking for here? What about a crown margin? Is he going to try to elevate that crown margin? Where is he going to try to put it for cleanliness? If I'm going to do a buildup, what type of restorative material does he want? Does he want me to place like a regen liner so that he can see the bright white area and the bright white composite and know where to stop a crown margin? And I think those are things that he's helped me with a ton. And hopefully I've been able to show him how to, write the referrals a little bit more effectively to me so they can get over faster.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, it's the, like Jeff and Ryan both said, I mean, it's a two-way street, and a lot of times the perpetual, it's a one-way street, and that's not knocking any of the perpetuals, but hopefully these conversations will help those perpetuals become El Presidentes and whatnot, and it truly becomes a two-way street.
Well, if nothing else, just having that type of relationship. You don't have to be the highest referral to just have a good working relationship with your referral base, to at least be able to pick up the phone, because there are things that walk in like trauma or, an adverse event that occurs, and you do need that person who has an extra level of expertise in certain areas to say, I have this situation that has shown up in the office. this is what I'm thinking, but I would like to run it off somebody else to make sure, because this is the difference between keeping a number 8 central for a 9-year-old and not keeping a number 8 central. So having your like core group of individuals that you can shoot a text to and say, here's the situation, what would you do, is so invaluable, and your referral sources end up being a big part of those conversations.
And another thing that I see, I don't want to call it a pitfall, but I usually the El Presidentes, you don't see this from, but I'm going to watch this lesion, or,
Yeah.
this lesion's had a shadow on it for 5 years, 6 years. It's like, it doesn't go anywhere. It's like, okay, that's not a scar. That's very unlikely to be an apical scar, and I'm not saying I treat 100% of those, but I also think it's worth at least getting over to the endodontist. Let me take a scan. Is there just an overtly missed canal that is just seeding something potential, or just a time bomb waiting to happen? Is there a vertical root fracture in this tooth that's just been slowly brewing, but it's asymptomatic because it's a circular draining sinus tract? Well, things like that, I just have a hard time watching those over time, or at least if it's being watched, kick it over to the endodontist, let them watch it, because if it does go south, they're going there anyway. And now I at least have a data point for time 0 saying, okay, Chad said this has been there since they've been a new patient. They've been a new patient, or they've been a patient for a couple of years. Does it need an apico? I don't know. Let's watch. Let's kind of see things. But some of the time, I don't think we need to watch it like an ostrich with our head in the sand, but watch it proactively, saying, I don't need to treat yet, but this is something that I think would warrant further evaluation.
I think that's great.
That's another good point, is that I think a lot of times we don't realize how many tools that the specialist may have that we don't have. Or even if we have it, say in the case of cone beam, where a lot of general dentists have cone beam now. I talk about it all the time, but you use cone beam technology, but you probably use it very differently than most of us do. And you're really keyed into those high resolution, small field of view scans. And something that really impressed me about you is, because one of the times I really got to spend a lot of time with you was when we were out at Dental Ray talking about cone beam diagnosis and working with them and how to better that. Is that how many of your scans that you're looking at with a small field of view, high resolution, that you are still sending for an overread? And so, I mean, I just think that that's impressive on a whole different level. And I think most general dentists don't get that their specialists may be going to that level of care that they just simply can't provide in the GP setting most of the time.
Well, and it kind of, again, to the point of collaborative work is, yes, the same way, Jeff, you're taking a CT scan and you're looking at airway and TMJ position and things like that. That's so far above my area of expertise that I wouldn't know what to look at. But I recently was on a little group discussion with some of the physicians at Dental Ray and listening to what they're looking for. And I have to give a shout out to Dr. Matt Alvin. And this guy is just a true stud. He's a neuroradiologist, a head and neck neuroradiologist. And he's on my high res scans, he's picking up periapical radiolucencies, saying, there's one tracking on the mesial root to the crestal bone, or he's like potential caries versus resorption on tooth 28. I'm like, that's, again, super awesome collaborative work with Dental Ray of kind of taking these physicians who are specialists in the head and neck area, putting us in touch and letting us each learn from each other. And, so you're referring your patient to a specialist as an endodontist, but I'm also sending the scan to a specialist because that's their bread and butter. That's what they do. So kind of having a collaborative team approach to treat some of these cases really comes out with the patient being a big winner.
I would totally agree. And I was reading, I was looking at some statistics from Dental Ray, and I think Jacob might have gone over this, but what's always fascinating to me is that, 7% of the incidental findings are within what we're basically responsible for. 93% of the incidental findings are outside of what we're responsible
Yeah,
for.
exactly.
And I love that even on your small field of view, you're like, I want everything covered, because you have a little bit less real estate there, but you still have a potential for some sort of detrimental pathology to be in that field of view.
A bone lesion that
Mhm.
maybe an endodontist is not as well trained to find. Like, I mean, some kind of crazy neoplasm, in the bony structures. Kudos.
And I think we're all guilty of it. That, I take a CT scan, and Matt made a fun comment to me the other day. Matt Alvin, he's like, when I see a scan from Ryan, there's always pathology. He's like, that's the whole premise of why he's taking it. So
Yeah.
now he kind of has an alert, but also, we also get tunnel vision and put blinders on. You refer me number 8, periapical lucency. Okay. Am I checking for a fracture? Am I checking for nasopalatine duct cyst? Yeah. But what about the incidental finding on 13? Or what about the failing root canal on tooth 2 that just happened to be right on the very edge of the scan? And I have to be honest that there are things like that have slipped through the cracks with me, where I'm just so tunnel visioned on one thing that I am really glad I have had an overread from Dental Ray, because he brought a dental issue back to the forefront, saying, hey, Ryan, I think there's something else we need to take a look at. And great. Now I can talk to the patient about that, or give Chad a call and say, hey, on Mrs. Jones, do you have any old films on that? I think when she stops to you next, let's take a look at that and see if that's an extraction, or whatever the conversation leads to. But, the more sets of eyes, the better.
Well, you talk about, I know we're kind of going down a rabbit hole with CBCT and how important it is, but think about it this way. You take a CBCT that you're trying to get 14 as your focal point of view. You got the sinus, you got the parotid in there, and you've got 14 in there, along with 13, 15, and probably 12. We had a local dentist that died of a parotid neoplasm 3-4 months ago. Jacob, the medical radiologist, found a grade 4 neoplasm on a dental scan. And then I had a patient that I lost a couple years ago to sinus cancer. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we can miss. And so, I love that although you're focused on the teeth, you're focused on their overall health as well. And everything that could be going wrong, which may be the cause of the problem from the tooth when you really look at it sometimes.
How cool is it, though, that we are afforded the opportunity? If you think about routine preventative CTs in the medical arena, don't happen. 9 times out of 10, they are symptom driven, or I've showed up with this particular pain or whatever, and that's how you get a CT in the medical arena. We actually have the opportunity, because the technology has become so approachable for for the majority of GPs and specialists, that we can catch things actually kind of doing like a screen, in essence, like a mammogram would be, or a colonoscopy, and actually catch things much earlier than symptoms would have driven for diagnostic imaging. So we actually play a really cool part in the pre-screen process of maybe saving a few lives along the way, in a very optimistic view.
Agreed.
So I don't want to steal your thunder, but I wanted to tangent back to one thing that I also thought about with, pitfalls or things that we can improve between the endo and the GP, or things that I think are somewhat unclear, is our trauma guidelines. And I keep, both Saeed, my partner, and I keep a sheet right in front of our desk of trauma guidelines. One side's the fracture, the other side's avulsion. But I think a lot of times the trauma happens, and y'all are the first ones they call. They don't even know me. There's a handful of times where they know an endodontist or it's a family friend, but most of the time you guys are getting the call. And in some of these cases, time's of the essence. If it's a luxated tooth, the faster we can get that tooth repositioned or back into the correct socket placement, preventing ortho, preventing resorption, things like that, but also preventing the clot formation that's going to prevent me from repositioning that tooth and things of that nature. I would love to see trauma as fresh as it happens. And I think that's one thing that, mom and dad come to y'all, you guys do a palliative treatment and, hey, follow up the endodontist here in the next week or so. Heck, I would hope that Chad would call me and be like, hey man, this just happened. We either it needs to happen tonight, or first thing out of the gate tomorrow morning, I need you to get this patient in and see it, because then we can splint it and manage that. And, and especially in some kids, like prevent needing root canal treatment. If we can do things to, reposition that tooth or splint it back, or especially with open apices, if we can promote a vital root structure, maybe even just a speck pulpotomy or something like that with a neo putty barrier or something, things like that. If it goes beyond a day or two, we've just been stripped of that ability to keep a pulp vital. So that's one thing I would love for GPs is call me when it happens. Just let me know, like, hey, Jimmy's coming over. He just busted up his front tooth or got hit with a baseball. I'd love to get those as soon as possible.
It's funny that you say that, because I think, and there are GPs that will call someone, but I think the first instinct is always the oral surgeon. And nothing against oral surgeons, because gosh knows if they have an alveolar fracture or whatever, anything major, they absolutely need to be involved in the case. But I think from an endodontic perspective, I think that actually has probably one of the highest priorities. I mean, once you get past the real trauma, I think that's one of the highest priorities as far as preserving pulpal vitality. I would agree with you.
I saw this young gal. I saw her mid-November or so, and I am thankful, Chad, it wasn't a patient of yours, but the GP saw her, splinted her, got to me the next day. So I took a CT. Sure, there was an alveolar fracture, because if the tooth doesn't break, something has to give for that tooth to be out of position. And so small alveolar fracture, but the splint was there. We just kept that intact. And I've been monitoring her teeth. They were responding perfectly normal to cold up until last week. And only one tooth, it was number 8 on this young gal. She's a big athlete, and that's what caused the injury to begin with. But she was splinted 6 through 11. We left that on for 4 weeks, like the guidelines say. And every time I tested her teeth with cold, I told her, every time I see you, I'm going to test cold on the teeth. And finally, on our, about 5th visit, just over a 2.5 month period, number 8 finally kicked the bucket. But all the others were still vital. And I'm very, very happy that that's the case, and that we didn't rush to do treatment. I think, we'll continue to monitor these teeth, and, if they need treatment, great. And if they don't, even better. But that was an awesome case of got to me right away so I could see it. Yeah. I know what time 0 is. I know testing the tooth, it did respond to cold right away. So it's not one where I'm seeing it a month down the road. It's not responding. Well, is that because
did it before or not? Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
So I think in this case, what you're saying is that you're just going to continue to watch number 8.
Yeah. Yeah. I want the lesion to get nice and big for conclusive evidence.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's very unreliable.
Well, hey, as always, another spirited conversation, and we're a little bit over time. We could talk all night, but we've got to save some for next time. So what I was thinking is that we had a couple topics that we didn't get to, but Jeff really wanted to talk about some microorganisms, pathogens, bacteria that you found with that microscope from canals.
This one.
Yeah.
Where's it?
Yeah. So could we talk about that next time?
You bet. I have some histo slides, believe it or not, because I am that guy.
I think a full hour of just histo slides.
Yeah.
No pictures, very little talk, just written commentary about the histo slides.
Hey, all kidding aside,
they're H&E stained. We can talk all night about H&E and dog apicoectomies with neo-MTA.
That might be the show that we do shots.
The sad part is that he's serious. But I just thought of something really cool.
I got him on the site.
we have basically 2 that have become regulars on Dinks. we got Ryan, and we've got Tom Viola. How cool would it be to have a point counterpoint with Ryan and Tom?
I know.
Tom's a dental pharmacologist. I think it'd be a lot of fun because
Sweet.
there's a lot, a lot
Antibiotics
going on.
all up in your world.
I love drugs.
And then H&E stain slides. Anyhow, folks, I think that's a wrap for tonight. I just want to thank everybody for tuning in. It's funny when we start watching the viewership, the engagement, and the people that might have left to go to the restroom or something, then they come back. We see a lot of people grabbing on. This was a really, really great episode. So many great pearls. But one of the best things that you can take away from this is really just your referrals aren't just it's a yo-yo effect. You send them out to come back, but it's a two-way street. We need to work closely with our referrals, build relationships within our smaller communities. And I think it makes us all better to a certain extent. So thanks, Ryan, for being on here. And we will definitely have you back soon.
Love you guys. Great to join you again in 2023.
Love you, Donk.
All right. We'll see you soon, Donk. All right. Peace out, everybody. Have a good
night, everyone.
Night.
And that wraps up another podcast for Dentists in the Know. On behalf of Dr. Jennifer Bell, Dr. Chad Duplantis, and myself, remember that we've got a great profession, so let's make it a great day, Dinks.